Hello, everyone. So my name is Amit Singh, and I'm a campaign coordinator at MockCop. Before we begin, I just need to remind you of a couple of bits of important information. So reminder that this session is being held in English, Spanish, and French. Delegates, please follow the guidelines on the screen to be able to follow the call. This session will be in English, so if you need translation into Spanish or French, please join our interpretation channel by clicking on the interpretation mode and choosing the language you would like to hear. For better sound quality, please mute the original audio. Speakers, please remember to speak slowly and clearly and avoid regional vocabulary, acronyms, and jargons where possible. We have a team available for technical support throughout the event, so please send a message via the chat box or the delegation WhatsApp group if you need assistance. Those providing support will have technical support in their Zoom name. I'll give you all a few minutes to get yourself into the relevant language channels as well. Amazing. We'll give it another minute or so, and then we'll get started. Thank you very much. So, welcome to the Mock Education Minister Summit panel discussion on climate education and international decision making. Amidst the unfolding climate crisis, it becomes clear that education is a beacon of hope, empowerment, and transformation. It is through education that we sow the seeds of understanding, awareness, and action, nurturing a generation that is not just aware of the climate crisis, but is also equipped to drive change at both local and global levels. As we immerse ourselves in this dialogue, it is imperative to grasp that climate education arms us with a tool that needs to be championed radical change, whether within the walls of our homes or amidst the corridors of COP28. This transformation hinges on a dynamic interaction between decision makers and the young, bridging the gap between these realms. In alignment with these ideas, the purpose of this panel discussion stands on three different pillars. Firstly, to enhance our comprehension of the existing landscape of climate education within the sphere of international decision-making. Secondly, to illuminate the roles played by diverse actors in shaping these pivotal decisions. Thirdly, and finally, our aspiration is to uncover avenues through which young activists can authentically be given space to amplify their own voices in international arenas such as COP, transcending tokenism. Throughout our discourse, we remain acutely aware of the power imbalance young individuals contend with. The panel strives to take a step towards rectifying the disparity by fostering a shared space for decision makers and the youth, and both, to engage in meaningful exchange. In the crucible of the conversation, we seek not only to understand, but to harness the potential of education in driving seismic shifts. We envision a landscape where education becomes not just a source of knowledge, but a dynamic force propelling us towards the profound changes needed to secure our planet's future. To explore the topic of climate education and international decision-making, we've assembled a tapestry of voices, experiences, and expertise to speak on the topic. We're privileged to hear from the following speakers: Stefani Giannini, UNESCO Assistant Director General for Education; Xiaotie Zheng, Climate Advisor on the UN Youth Advisory on Climate Change; Dr. Kevin Frey, CEO of Generation Unlimited at UNICEF; Kasim Hussain, representing Youngo; Hayley Campbell, Co-Executive Director of Care About Climate and a climate adaptation specialist for the city and county of Honolulu. Firstly, I'm going to play you a pre-recorded speech from Stefania, who unfortunately was unable to join us live today.
Shama Al-Mazuri, distinguished delegates, colleagues, and guests, it's a real pleasure to speak to you today. As you, the youth, are the future, no doubt. And the global community must ask itself, how can we support your movement towards a greener planet and a more sustainable future? We at UNESCO believe that education and learning are at the very core of that movement, and that we must transform our education systems so that knowledge can empower you and the next generation to tackle the climate crisis effectively. Transformative education actually equips learners with the knowledge and the skills to be resilient and adaptable. Transformative education is the only way to change our thinking, our behavior, and most importantly, I would say, understanding of our relationship with each other and the planet. Young people tell us time and time again that when it comes to the climate, words are rarely matched by actions. We hear you. At least at UNESCO, we hear you very seriously. We know that you are calling for wholesale social, economic, and cultural change. And we support you and want to empower you through education, which is not a solution for all, for sure, but which is a very big part of the equation. As the leading voice for education for sustainable development, UNESCO started many years ago and working hard to modernize education for this century by placing the protection of our environment, the nature, the planet, at the center of how we teach science, how we teach culture, history, and all other disciplines. In 2022, UNESCO convened a World Conference on what we call Education for Sustainable Development, which is a broader framework. And during this ministerial meeting, which over 70 ministers of education adopted the Berlin Declaration, we all called together government, member states, and international organizations for integrating environmental education into learning at all levels, keeping an holistic approach. That same year, at COP26 in Glasgow, some of you, I'm sure you remember clearly, UNESCO convened also the very first ever ministerial meeting on climate education, asking kindly ministers of education and ministers of an environment to be in the same room, to share the same agenda, and to take the same commitment. And to help move beyond the words and translate commitments into action, UNESCO and our partners launched recently, last year, the Greening Education Partnership at the UN Transforming Education Summit, as I'm sure you remember. This partnership is about reinforcing the need to mainstream climate change into all aspects of learning. And it's framed in a very simple way. Let me briefly recall the 4 pillars. Greening schools, because it's about transforming schools into climate-friendly spaces for students to learn and live out what they learn. Greening curriculum, because it's about the content, and it's about integrating climate change into content and programs at all levels of education. Greening teachers' training and education systems capacities, because the teachers tell us that they feel that this is an important, unavoidable, change to make, but they feel to be not prepared for the mission. And finally, last but really not the least, greening communities, because we know that it's about lifelong learning approach that we can help everyone, including adults, including all the community which is around the schools. And this is about acquiring the skills and the knowledge for a climate resilient society. Well, our goal throughout is to embed sustainability in all different dimensions of the learning experience. 72 member states and over 800 organizations, including some who are present here today in the meeting, have signed up to the Greening Education Partnership so far. And we hope more will join us. UK is one of the key members and one of the founder, I would say, and champions country. And I wish to take the opportunity to recognize and commend the government for that. And as we continue to move from word into implementation and action, we need you. We need your voices. We need your youthful participation to help lead the way. We need also your leadership and ownership of such a subject which is so close to your priorities and heart. And for that, this year will be a big year for education at COP28 in Dubai. The very first Green in Education pavilion in history will be launched under the leadership of the hosting country, the government of United Arab Emirates. And still, I take the opportunity to commend and thank UAE for that commitment. It will be structured around the Green in Education Partnership and will be solutions-oriented. We hope that the Green in Education Partnership pillars can also anchor your discussions about the need to transform, the transformative role of education in bringing about a greener planet. Well, let's continue to work together. Let's continue to amplify our call for a better society, a healthier and more equitable planet. Is the only one we have, as we all know, and we have the collective responsibility to transmit this heritage, precious heritage, to the next generation. We look forward at UNESCO to working with you to harness transformation and the transformative power of green education. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that. It's been really, really useful, especially hearing about the Greening Education Partnership, and especially including the climate change in all aspects of learning, 4 pillars, running green schools, curriculum, communities, and so on. I especially take on the point about communities, because I think it's so important to bring in young people and the rest of the community together in one place to work together and create sustainable joy that was described as lifelong. So I thought was a really, really powerful word used there as well. I'm now going to pass it on to Fatou to hear from her as well.
Hi, thank you so much for having me in this session. And as the UNICEF UNESCO speaker actually mentioned, equitable and sustainable climate is all we need, and we obviously need better collaboration amongst different stakeholders in ensuring that we actually achieve our goal and our aim in promoting climate education in our countries and our communities. So just to quickly share, obviously, we all understand how climate education is quite important for us and the work that we do across our countries and in our groups. So apologies, I have my son, so you'll be hearing a lot of background noise. Yes, and just to all the participants here, happy International Youth Day to everyone, and just want to encourage us to continue the work that we do in advancing climate action and climate education in our communities and our countries. So obviously, as I've mentioned, climate education is very, very crucial in the work that we do. And that is why Article 12 of the Paris Agreement obviously mentions climate education, climate awareness, youth and capacity building, because these are really crucial in ensuring that we achieve what we have to in the climate field, or in our climate work that we do. So as someone with a background, or someone that has obviously been working on climate education over the past years, I will say, first of all, climate education actually more or less helps in building the awareness and education of communities and individuals to understand what climate change really holds, as well as ensuring that communities, individuals, and different stakeholders play a very crucial role in addressing it because of the awareness that we have in place. In addition to that, obviously, climate education has over the years been able to change the behaviors of people and communities, because of the impact of the activities that have been done with regards to climate education, and that has also more or less folded or that has also more or less also improved and helped in the advocacy efforts that we do as young people and as individuals to advocate for more or less like stronger policies, stronger actions and initiatives to mitigate and adapt to the climate crisis that we are facing at the national, the local, and the international level. And we have also seen how youth engagement in climate action over the years has been very crucial because, for instance, in Africa, young people constitute the majority of our population, and that means we have to harness the demographic dividends that we have. And having young people engage and involved in climate advocacy and climate activism is very crucial for us because, one, we are harnessing and tapping into our demographic dividends, and also we are making use of the resources that we have available to ensure we build our green skills and innovations, among others. Even though we continue to face disproportionate impacts of climate change as young people, and we continue to see how it affects our daily lives, but youth engagement is very crucial in climate education or in general, just climate action, because we are able to tap into our skills and our experiences and our resources to be able to advance actions through our organizations or even through our different initiatives that we continue to do. To just bring it down at the local level, for instance, at Cleaner Gambia over the years, we have been able to mobilize thousands of young people across the country, because Gambia is a country that is quite vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. But when it comes to the awareness level, it has been quite low because we don't have some of the structures in place to ensure that young people as well as other vulnerable groups are trained and educated to be able to adapt effectively to the impacts of climate change. So over the years, as an alternative, what we have been doing is to build the capacities of young people from across the country so that they could be able to get the knowledge that they need to know in regards to climate-related issues. And that has been very helpful for us because we have been able to see an increase in climate enthusiasts and climate activists across the country, which is very crucial in just climate adaptation in general. In addition to that, through our different restoration projects, through our different advocacy awareness projects, among others, we have been able to ensure that we not only mobilize, but also, apart from the capacity building, getting young people into restoration initiatives to ensure that we support in nature-based solution, in green jobs, in other sectors concerning climate-related issues. But the challenge obviously has been the fact that as a country, for instance, we still do not have environmental education incorporated in our basic and elementary school curriculum. And that is something that we have been talking about for the past years as activists and organizations to influence government policies so that we could have climate education incorporated in our basic and elementary school curriculum, because in that way it makes it easier for us as a country to implement Article 12 of the Paris Agreement in our NDCs, even though we have climate education, for instance, in our NDCs, young people are obviously mentioned on other vulnerable groups, but more or less it's not kind of like reflected. And I am obviously a firm believer of catching them young, because at a young age, if we catch these children and youth to understand climate-related issues, it obviously more or less kind of like makes it easier to have an informed population or an informed generation who know about issues concerning climate change and how they could take actions. So I really look forward to seeing climate education incorporated in our systems. That way it makes it easier as organizations to more or less complement the work of the government. But if it is not included in our education system, it means that as NGOs or as organizations, we have to obviously do our level best to make sure that we train as many people as possible. And obviously we all understand the constraints that NGOs usually face in terms of funding to be able to implement projects. Most organizations, I'll say, especially in the global south, run based on like funding or are project based. So after the funding, we don't really have, like, for instance, to make it long term or all of that. So having climate education incorporated in our education system is very crucial. And that would bring me on the issue of obviously the decision making aspect of the conversations that we're having today. So global cooperation, global partnership is really crucial in the advocacy that we do, because that way it helps build synergy and it also helps build collaboration and partnership, because you're having different stakeholders from around the world or from different sectors of development actually coming together to build synergy and collaboration. That is why obviously with the UNFCCC Paris Agreement, and we also some other regional and local policies obviously mentioning climate education among others. So that means we obviously see the value and the importance of climate education. But I would love to see more financing in going forward or going to climate education projects, especially in vulnerable countries where climate change obviously hits the hardest? Because I believe that's done, it really helps a lot in terms of our adaptation strategies, among others. And that is why I love to see more global collaboration in terms of climate education. And just to wrap it up, I'm not sure because I haven't been timing myself and I don't want to go beyond time, but that is why I'll say again, for us to be able to have an equitable and sustainable society where every stakeholder, where especially the most vulnerable, that is young and future generation, have access to climate resilience facilities, climate resilience structures, we need to ensure that climate education is in place, because I think that's like the pillar, or that's like the backbone in terms of ensuring that vulnerable societies and communities actually are actively engaged and taking ownership. Because if there's no climate education, there is no awareness. And when there's no awareness, then there is no ownership or there is no involvement. And I think that's where we need to start from. Involvement of communities, but ensuring that they are educated, they have awareness, they have the technology, they have the tools to be able to build their knowledge and the capacities to be able to take actions to address the climate problems that we are facing. So I really look forward to seeing more collaboration, especially at the global level, trickling down to the national level, where governments take more importance or have more importance in terms of ensuring that climate education is incorporated in our national policies and our strategies. And it's even sad, I think, to see that even some countries do not have like ACE national focal points to the UNFCCC, and that's also a problem, because at the end of the day, if we are not really having like government commitments in terms of ensuring that we have representatives or we have people from the government who will sit and have conversations on issues of ACE, then there's also a challenge. So I really look forward again to seeing more government commitments, more funding going towards climate education, more support to NGOs and groups that actually work on climate related issues, so that they could support to ensure that there is more collaboration to support communities to build their awareness, to build their education level on climate education among other intersecting issues within or around surrounding climate change. So thank you so much, and I look forward to the other conversations in this discussion.
Thank you so much. That was really, really powerful to hear. I really appreciated how you started by talking about activism as a form of democracy in itself, building capacity as a way to actually get more climate activists on board and thereby increasing our power, our resources. And also appreciated how you brought in the different aspects about how financing, for example, is also very, very important when we talk about actually building this capacity, making sure that the NDCs that have been put out at COP28, COP26, COP27 are actually put into practice on the local, on the national levels as well, so that we can actually teach our children, teach the young people at the right time, rather than missing it and being too late. I'd like to pass it on now to I'd like to pass it on to Kasim Hussein. And before I do that, I just want to mention, if I could ask speakers to speak a bit slower, purely because our translators are trying to keep up with the speech. So if we could speak a bit slow for the translators, that'd be really, really appreciated. And with that, I'll pass it over to Kasim. Thank you.
Yeah, hello. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. Just picking up from where Fatu ended. I want to and sorry for my background. My background is a bit noisy. Just picking up from where Fatu ended, I think Fatu mentioned of the lack of the ACE focal point, because yes, and that would take me into what ACE and how ACE is integrated, education is integrated into this whole ACE issue, because now, like Fatu said, education itself is one of the elements of ACE. And as ACE has 6 main elements, we have education, training, public participation, public access to information. All these elements, yes, unfortunately, a lot of emphasis have been placed on education. But then, yes, because education is key. Without education, there's no participation, there's no training. None of the other elements will exist, even though they are interconnected in one way or the other. Now we know very well that, climate education is very, very important, and strengthening the inclusion and engagement of young people in climate education is very, very key. One, young people's voices bring fresh perspectives. It brings innovative ideas, and it brings a very deep understanding of the evolving challenges. Now, without education, how are we able to, take up some of these issues? And to achieve this type of creativity, I think there's the need for a platform to be created that directly involves the youth. And some of these platforms are what we call the youth councils, which is mainly at the national level. And I believe very well that to get youth involved at the global level, at the international level, there is the need to start it from the national level, because the international consists of national. So at the national level, there is the need for the youth to engage with the national focal point, get to know what is being done on the ground, and then how they can be actively involved. If on the ground they are able to get engaged, they are able to get to understand some of the key issues which are being undertaken, or some of the key projects which are being undertaken in terms of mitigation and adaptation. And we know very well that climate education is very key, because without education, there's no way we can implement very meaningful mitigation and adaptation projects. So there's the need to get the youth involved to get understanding, to have an understanding of climate change education. And this is very, very key. And this involves, we can probably, at the national level, try to set up a basic a mentorship program. And this mentorship program basically is to get the youth trained by those who are well empowered, well equipped about climate change education. And this can be done with, in partnership with the ACE focal point, because the ACE focal point have had the requisite training about climate education. They have been given the assets, the tools. I know very well that they just ended SB 58. There was the ACE Academy for the focal point, which was basically on training on education, training, public participation. But at these international negotiations, the youth were not given access to be able to depart in some of this training. So the only avenue to get to be well engaged at the international level is to engage with the ACE focal points. And engaging with them is very, very key, because it helps to build a sort of partnership with them. And then it helps to also help the youth to be able to learn on issues of climate change. So you don't end up, being without the capacity to be able to contribute meaningfully, even at the international level. So that is one key thing that can be done. Another thing that can be done is, yes, even though at the international level, yes, there is the ACE strategy, which has been, the ACE action plan, which has been developed. The ACE action plan takes into consideration some of these issues. But then there was one key issue which Yongo, which is the ACE working group of Yongo, were advocating for. We're advocating that there will be more ACE youth, national ACE youth focal point. And basically, what is the role of the national ACE youth focal point? The main aim was to get the youth more connected to the ACE focal point. And by connecting to the ACE focal point, the youth gets the opportunity to learn, issues about climate change. And like I'm saying, even though, yes, we are limiting ourselves to education, ACE is a bit broad. It has all the 6 elements. So pitch education is part of it. One of the ways is getting the youth involved with the ACE focal point, so that they will be able to learn from them, which is more of an apprentice thing, so that at the international level, when they get the opportunity or they get the seat to be part of the ACE negotiations, they will be able to make a meaningful contribution. But unfortunately, this was turned down. And so this is one of the avenues that as Yongo we were pushing for. And yes, there's also currently the national ACE strategies, which is being developed at the national level, because like I said, to be meaningfully engaged at the international level, there's the need to have a very strong root at the national level. So at the national level, AIDS national strategies are being developed, there's the need for the youth to make meaningful impact, because those AIDS national strategies, this is just the beginning. And those, like, let's take Ghana as an example. Ghana has meaningfully developed its national strategy. And in doing so, it took into consideration youth inputs, because youth were invited on the table, were given a seat on the table. They made inputs on how they want climate change to be incorporated at the junior high, senior high level, for students to be able to understand issues of climate change, because we know very well how climate change affects everyone, irrespective of location. So this is one of the ways that the youth can be involved. So I would like to pause here. This is my preliminary presentation. If there's anything, I'll clarify. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hussein. That was really useful, especially hearing about the mentorship program and the ideas about how we can actually share that intergenerational learning, share that interprofessional learning, which I think we've been seeing for a long time. In fact, we've been seeing from local communities, from indigenous communities and so on, how intergenerational learning and passing on knowledge through informal forms of mentorship have been going on for such a long time already. So I think that that idea is really powerful, and it is quite sad to hear that it was rejected as well. So thank you very much for bringing that out and bringing that into public space a bit more as well. With that, I'd like to pass it on now to Hayley Campbell. Thank you.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Good morning. It is 4 a.m. for me. So morning for me, but hopefully having a good day or evening for all of you who are out there. Sorry, the lighting's a bit bad as a result of that. But in any case, thank you so much for having me. My name is Hayley Campbell, and I'm co-executive director of the youth-led nonprofit Care About Climate, where we are using climate education and training to build a global movement to advocate for inclusive participation of young people in climate decision-making spaces. And to begin, I'm going to take us on a little bit of a different route. I'd love everyone to take a moment to close their eyes, take a deep breath, and unlock your imagination with me. Imagine a world where every individual, young to old, from remote villages to bustling urban centers, possess a deep understanding of our climate. Picture a society where people not only grasp the climate science behind rising temperatures, biodiversity loss, and extreme weather events, but also comprehend the interconnectedness of it all. The delicate hug from our ecosystems, the intricate balance of humans and nature, and the blanket of love that we all have for one another, allowing us all to lead with empathy. Colonialism, sexism, racism are nothing but dark memories of the past, where humanity favored greed and ego over life. Billionaires no longer exist. Land rights have been restored. Communities thrive on clean energy and access to education. Everyone is paid a fair wage. We exist with nature. We are happy, not just presently, but for at least 7 generations to come after us. Now you can open your eyes. To build this future world requires climate education. Everyone here is in this room today because of climate education. Some people have had the privilege of learning about climate change in school, while others have learned through lived experiences, storytelling, and social media, pushing us to join these types of spaces and to learn more. Next to our voices, climate education is our most powerful tool for achieving climate justice. Yet, 40% of adults worldwide today have never even heard of climate change. This number rises to 65% in some of the less industrialized countries as well. I grew up in one of these communities where climate denial was the norm. Though I had an interest in talking about it, nobody else really cared because all they saw was the same news channel claiming that climate change was just not real. Plus, public schools were not told to teach about anything other than global warming and the hole in the ozone layer, without concern for what that means for our future or for what climate change actually is. I would argue that for most of my life, a majority of adults in my community never heard of climate change, or they believed it to be a hoax. Though I was one of the lucky few Texans to learn about climate change from a teacher who cared about it in school, it wasn't until I attended COP25 in Madrid, Spain, that I finally felt empowered to join the climate movement. But when I first joined it, I'm not going to lie, I was terrified. I feel like I didn't belong, that I was behind everyone else because I didn't have the same knowledge as them. And joining the conversations to weave climate change into every topic at school was about my only experience. How many of you have ever felt this way? If you have, you're not alone, because the international climate space is filled with complex vocabulary, technical dialogues, and diplomatic, illusions of people really saying things that kind of sound a little bit extra or unique than what we normally use as our everyday language. But had it not been for a young person that invited me to join the Action for Climate Empowerment, or ACE, working group of Youngo, which, as Fatu and Hussein have both mentioned, is the article of the Paris Agreement that advocates for climate education, training, awareness raising, information access, and more, I wouldn't be even here today with y'all. And suddenly, my one friend turned into a group where every single young person was encouraged to speak up and share their opinion. They took their time to welcome me with their blankets of love to their space, to the youth community, and to the work. And since then, I've learned a lot about navigating the international climate diplomacy space because of ACE in Action. So in addition to being asked to serve as executive director of a nonprofit whose mission centers around empowering climate activists at COP, my proudest accomplishment is securing the formal inclusion of young people as stakeholders in the climate decision-making spaces through the ACE action plan at COP27. For the first time, governments agreed that young people are key stakeholders and vital leaders to listen to and work with as we tackle the climate crisis, giving us a little policy lever and a tool to bring with us to tables when we want to be included and when we deserve to be included in these spaces. But of course, there's still more work to be done, as mentioned by the previous speakers, because climate education is fundamental to our future, yet often underutilized, underfunded, underaccessed, undertrained, as just mentioned, and even at the national level, just in general, underfunded, and without a bigger understanding of the larger picture of why it's important to continue talking about climate change, climate impacts, adaptation efforts, and more. So instead of just sharing some policy proposals with you today, I'm excited to share a few key strategies and pieces of advice that have helped me navigate the complex and terrifying, yet exciting space of international climate policy, in hopes that you can all join us in implementing ACE and also long-term youth inclusive climate action. If you want to learn more, I'm also really excited to share that Care About Climate has launched our new COP training course. So you can definitely learn more if you're interested there after your experience here today. But first, my piece of advice is, or really a step rather, is that young people are the best people to decide what we need to thrive in the future. Beyond our personal stake, we're also sorting solutions today and holding our leaders accountable to injustices. When I became in charge of Care About Climate, I was told by a mentor, do we really need another youth organization? I was shocked, one, because this organization had already existed, but two, because she's a really strong women's rights activist. And I asked if she thought we needed more women in politics or women-owned businesses. And when I connected my experience to what she cared about, everything clicked. She acknowledged how our power as young people is rooted in how we see the world as a horizontal hierarchy where all perspectives matter. That's our strength. And as a digitally connective and one of the more inclusive generations, we have this equity first perspective that's allowing us to build this better world that we deserve. Second is, don't be afraid to challenge the status quo, but do your research. When I first began strategizing to meet with policymakers, I naively thought that they would be so excited to welcome our ideas with open arms. If only, right? That'd be awesome. Some of them are, but many of them are not. And the more I learned, the more I realized that preparing responses to possible questions and challenges that could arise from conversations with them is really important to help win them over, but to also help them see your value. Third, always be a student of life, sometimes a teacher, but never the expert. The older we get, the further away from school we are, the more likely we are to forget that we're part of an ever-changing system that requires us to continuously learn. For example, when I was advocating for youth inclusion in the ACE action plan, policymakers questioned why we needed to specifically call out young people. They didn't get to join these conversations, why we should join these conversations as youth. Suddenly, we became educators on youth inclusion. When we came with strong explanations and text proposals, it gave them a place to start, ultimately giving us a successful outcome. Finally, build relationships and make friends to create change. I've been told many times that policymakers fear young people because of our digital connectivity, our ability to hold them accountable and call them out. But that's really our power in terms of making them our friends in this space, in the movement, so that we can together work for intergenerational climate justice. All of these things that I just said, I want to acknowledge that I believe it shouldn't take going to an international climate conference, right, to feel empowered on the climate crisis and to take climate action. The more I started posting on social media and talking about my experiences to achieve climate justice, the more my community of climate deniers back at home started asking questions. Before I knew it, I was convincing lifelong climate deniers, including my own dad, of the importance to act on climate change. Using my experiences from the international space has allowed me to use the power of intergenerational dialogue to invite people I never imagined to join this fight with me. Today, as I mentioned, I'm calling in at 4 a.m. with deep respect and aloha to share from the Hawaiian Islands today, where I live. Well, you've probably heard about the dangerous hurricane wind-fueled wildfires that ripped through our home just this week. An entire town was lost, and on my neighbor island of Maui. Jobs, homes, lives, Native Hawaiian culture and history were all lost to the firestorm, fueled by fossil fuel lobbyists, land management practices that were poor, and political failure to act on the climate emergency. And these fires, according to a local leader, Kaniela, are really a scorching warning of what's to come if Indigenous communities aren't protected from climate change. While fires put an Indigenous community to pieces over here, there's also an upcoming vote thanks to the advocacy of Indigenous leaders to keep oil in the ground in the Amazon and Ecuador. These experiences remind us about the importance of continuous learning for climate adaptation while implementing the solutions we know are already needed to stop climate change. Climate education is our yarn for weaving together hope and climate justice. The more we learn about climate change, the better equipped we are to make decisions and fight for solutions that are shaping our future. It empowers us to decipher the warnings our planet is sending, to interpret data, and to respond with urgency and intelligence that this crisis demands. It also helps us break down the barriers for future generations that have prevented our involvement in climate action for far too long. Most importantly, it inspires us to recognize our differences and use them to work together towards our common goal of a fossil fuel-free future. And I'm so excited to be in this fight together with all of you. And thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Haley. That was a really, really powerful speech. Firstly, I want to thank you for coming on at 4 a.m. in the morning. I know how difficult that can be, so really appreciate that. And secondly, sending warm energies and hope and health for all the community that's been affected by the wildfires, by the hurricanes, and everything else that you've mentioned directly as a result of fossil fuel lobbyists and fossil fuel action itself. I also want to take a minute to appreciate the really beautiful introduction, bringing in that reimagination practice and talking about how, climate education can be done in formal and in informal ways. I thought that was really powerful, especially as you went into the conversation about how you found friends in Youngo who were there to teach you informally and share that knowledge with you. I think that's a really beautiful way that we can all of us sitting here today, listening today, can actually work together and helping each other as we progress into this space and work towards creating action as well. So that's really, really powerful. Thank you. With that, I'd like to invite Dr. Kevin Frey to speak as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amit Shor. And thank you to Haley. I have to say, after that imagination exercise, you asked us to open our eyes, and I really didn't want to, because the place you described was really kind of a beautiful place that hopefully working together we can all get closer to. I also want to start with a little imagination exercise, and ask everybody here to think about a world, to imagine a world where the decision makers who are choosing the path we will take forward are not the usual suspects of government and private sector, but it's actually children and young people. We're standing at a fork in the road, where one road leads to an arid, barren wasteland, much like what we're seeing in images and video today on the news, or as the United Nations Secretary General called it recently, the highway to climate hell. And the other road leads to a green, a sustainable world where humans live in harmony with the planet, like the world that Haley just described for us. How different would the world be if we had young people making those decisions? Dear youth delegates and partners, as we gather here for this mock education ministers summit, I want to highlight an urgent and shared mission. We must nurture this generation of children and young people who will be charged with the responsibility to steer our planet towards a green and sustainable future. Now, children and youth did not create this crisis, yet they stand at the forefront of the battle against climate change, and they are the population who will suffer its greatest consequences. At UNICEF's Generation Unlimited, where I serve as CEO, we believe that climate solutions need to be co-designed and co-created with young people who will inherit this planet. Young people are motivated and they're ready to take climate action and create the future that they want and that they deserve. Generation Unlimited is a global partnership, and we bring together governments, corporations, civil society, and young people to work together as equal partners to realize our mission to skill the world's 1.8 billion young people and connect them to opportunities for employment, entrepreneurship, and social impact. At Generation Unlimited, we're currently running programs in over 80 countries. But within our mission, we are laser focused on preparing young people for the twin transitions that will define their future: the transition to a digital world and the transition to a green world. The research is clear about the future of jobs. Young people will need to have the digital skills and the green skills to thrive in the economy of tomorrow. One of the best parts of my role as CEO of UNICEF's Generation Unlimited is that I have the opportunity to listen to young people, talk to young people, hear about their hopes and fears, successes and failures, challenges and opportunities. For example, Jean-Claude Niou-Mugabo, a brilliant young person from Generation Unlimited's Young People's Action Team, said, "We, the youth, are destined to live with the world that climate change creates." And that's a chilling reality, but it's also a call to action. But as we heard from some of today's other speakers, while young people are ready to act, in many places, they don't know what to do. According to a recent UNICEF survey, nearly 2/3, 64% of young people in South Asia, home to many climate vulnerable geographies, cannot explain climate change. And if you don't understand what climate change is, it's very difficult to know what to do. And therein lies two challenges that we can address. First, through education and skilling, and that's why we're here today. A successful transition towards a greener world requires that individuals have both green mindsets and green skills. Yet a staggering 60% of young people globally are unequipped for the green economy. This means that while young people will be the most affected by climate change, they are not adequately prepared to be part of the solution. And let's not forget, I think it's so important, we've heard also from Stefania earlier today and some of our other speakers, that we're not just talking about textbooks and knowledge. We have to, through our education systems, fuel the fires of inspiration, curiosity, leadership, and most importantly, action. Knowledge without action is not going to move us forward. Secondly, we have to address representation. Again, we've heard a lot about this already from previous speakers today. But despite the fact that the future belongs to young people, they are regularly and systematically excluded from pivotal decision-making processes and bodies, which are allocating the extraordinarily large sums of money towards climate-related strategies. Young people's dreams, their hopes, and their ideas are often muted and unaccounted for in key global forums I participate in. Children from the global south, indigenous communities, small island developing states are facing some of the world's harshest climate realities. Yet their children and young people face structural barriers that often preclude them from sharing their stories and solutions on global platforms. We can no longer let these voices go unheard. And that's why at UNICEF's Generation Unlimited, we're charting a 3-path fold forward. First, partnering with youth. We believe in co-creating solutions with young people as equal partners. For example, GenU's Global Volunteer Initiative works alongside millions of young people, 10 million young people last year, who designed community-level interventions, and they're taking action on environmental issues. Or GenU's Imagine Ventures program, it's an entrepreneurial incubator, where in 2023, we'll support 25,000 young people to create entrepreneurial solutions that address climate change. We're working lockstep with young people to move from knowledge and ideas to action and impact. And we're seeing budding minds turn into green warriors. And we're fueling youth-led innovations that contribute to the SDGs with seed capital and mentoring. Second, we are advocating for inclusion. At UN summits, at COP platforms, where the big decisions are getting made, the seats at the table are slowly starting to open to younger faces, ensuring discussions and decisions consider future generations. We actually heard a previous speaker talk about making decisions that take 7 generations of the future into consideration. I think it's a brilliant idea. Currently, Generation Unlimited is funding a youth engagement specialist, a young person, to work with inside the COP28 presidency at the UAE, championing youth engagement in all aspects of COP28. And most importantly, advocating for youth to be at the negotiating table where the big decisions are getting made. We want this COP28 and all future COPs to have youth at the center. We're making progress, but it's slow. It's way too slow, and we still have so far to go. And finally, we're influencing policy through data. Without data and evidence, it's very difficult to get the ear of policymakers and budget decision makers. UNICEF's report, The Heat is On, is a great example, which I suggest everyone reads. It demonstrates how we can use data and evidence to influence policy. At GenU, we're striving to realize the dreams of young people like Amal Ridhan, who I actually met at COP27 last year. She's a young woman from Tunisia. And this is a little bit of progress that I was talking about. She was actually at the negotiating table and not just out speaking on the stage, she was in the negotiations. She said, as young people, we advocate that our belief and persistence to ensure a greener world are matched with the empowerment, the inclusion and commitment from policymakers in the private sector. Young people can't do it alone. We have to bring policymakers in the private sector along. At Generation Unlimited events at COP27, young people took the stage not merely as participants, but as harbingers of change. Young people shouted not with their voices, but with their actions, demonstrating the powerful role that youth can play in a net zero future. They championed a future where young people aren't spectators. They are core contributors to climate action. Together with global actors like UNICEF, ILO, UNEP, and our passionate young torchbearers, we unveiled the Green Jobs for Youth Pact. A pact not of words, but of transformative actions. A commitment to support the greening of 1 million existing jobs for young people, fostering 10,000 nascent green entrepreneurs, and embedding sustainable practices in 50,000 businesses by 2030. But that's not enough. COP27 was just a warm-up act. Building on its momentum, we've now launched the Green Rising, a youth-led crusade aiming to amplify, scale, and track the climate initiatives of our young change makers. At COP28 in Dubai, GenU events will resonate with tales of over 1 million young heroes from every corner of the world. Their stories, their actions will inspire countless others, urging governments and the private sector to rally. But the Green Rising isn't just a program, it's a movement shaped with youth, by youth, aiming to activate millions in the battle against climate change. Rooted in Generation Unlimited's Global Volunteer Initiative, our ambition is massive, mobilizing 10 million young people at the grassroots, hyper-local community level by 2025. enabling them to protect their communities from the harsh realities of a climate change that is not some imagined future with a 1.5 degree timeline. It's a crisis that's arrived, that's happening now, destroying livelihoods and communities. So on this International Youth Day, the world's focus is on its youth. And the theme is green skills for youth towards a sustainable future. And I think it's absolutely clear, and we've heard it again and again today, that transitioning to a green and sustainable world, it's actually not a choice. It's a matter of survival. It has to be the highest priority. And make no mistake, young people are up for the challenge. And as we stand at this critical juncture, I'd like to suggest that we should focus on three things. First, embedding youth leadership within our governance structures. Like at UNICEF's Generation Unlimited, where we have young people sitting beside heads of state, CEOs of some of the largest organizations, corporations in the world. Youth need to be at the table making decisions as equal partners. Second, we have to commit to amplifying youth voices. Let's make youth voices the cornerstone of national and international climate dialogues. And let's talk about those 7 generations in the future, so that when we make decisions, we're not making them for today, we're making them for that 7th generation. And finally, let's champion youth action, rally behind our budding eco-warriors and innovators, and join initiatives like the Green Rising that are moving us from knowledge to action. So in conclusion, I want to call on all of us today to dare to partner with children, really partner with children and young people, to dream, to act, and to deliver the green and sustainable planet that they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kevin. That was incredibly powerful, especially like hearing about how climate solutions must be co-designed and co-created with young people. I really appreciated that, because we often hear about, we need to have young people in the room so we can show that they're there in the room, not to do the whole process together from start till finish. And also bringing that down to the community level and not just on the international level, I think is also incredibly powerful, because like you said, that's where the impact must be happening. And that's where we need to actually make that change, So thank you so much for sharing that. And finally, thank you very much for that reality check as well. The crisis is happening now. It's not just a situation of the future. The 1.5 degrees is a threat, but the right now is also a very big threat. And we must recognize that as we take action forward from here on. So thank you very much. And thank you to all of our speakers for all of your wonderful discussion points. It's been really powerful to hear this on the intersection of climate education and international decision-making. We've journeyed through the landscapes of education, understanding how knowledge is bedrock upon which our collective response to the climate crisis rests. Education is not just about transferring facts, it's about nurturing a mindset of responsibility, accountability, and empowerment. In our midst, we've had the privilege of hearing from voices that amplify the need for radical change, from grassroots movements that prove the potency of local action, to the relentlessness drive of young activists insisting on their seat at the decision-making table. These perspectives underscore that our response to climate change must be dynamic, inclusive, and unapologetically bold. Our discourse today takes a step towards bridging the gap between generations, recognizing that climate education isn't just a transmission of information, it's an investment into our shared future. As we stand at the crossroads of global decision-making, let us not forget that policy changes are driven by the informed voices of those who demand action. Climate education and international decision-making are intertwined threads that weave a tapestry of resilience, adaptability, and hope for a sustained world. Through the conclusion of this chapter of dialogue, we have sown seeds for transformation towards climate education justice. Thank you, our panelists, for your invaluable contributions, and thank you, our audience, for your engagement. Delegates, you can now join your regional breakout rooms for another discussion on the draft statement and amendments. For those joining online, we'll see you again at 7 p.m. UTC for our panel discussion on quality climate education. Don't forget to share your thoughts and experiences at the Mock EMS on social media, tag MockCop on Twitter and Instagram, and use the hashtags #MockEMS and #Climate